We have had a lot of talk recently about Kemi Badenoch, and especially from what we've seen from the Conservative view. And really, if you look at what uh, everything that we've covered very recently from Conservative Home, even reading, of course, the comments in her bizarre culture war speech where she went across to America. And honestly, when you look back at those comments, it is all UK Conservatives going, what on earth is she talking about? Why is she talking about this? What is she doing? Kind of funny to see that. Bear in mind, already it is rumored that the Robert Jerrick fanboys and the fan club out there are going, see, we told you we were right. Kemi was a bad choice. Should have gone with Jerrick. So already those are at least rumors, supposedly, of whispers starting. But the further and further we get away, the more those whispers are going to be slowly becoming louder and louder and louder. Because still at the moment, remember, there is no policy coming out from Kemi Badenoch about what she would do if she was Tory Prime Minister. There is no news on how she intends to reform the Tory party, given all the trouble and turmoil that is going on politically just within the party structure at CCHQ. None of that has yet been forthcoming. And if you've got someone who I really do believe has been promoted well above their abilities, which definitely seems to be the case, and she has surrounded herself with yes men, just as Boris Johnson did, well, quite frankly, we can already see the rocks about to hit her ship. And when it does, she is going to sink very, very fast indeed. And even though there has been a higher threshold, of course, now to launch a Conservative leadership contest, even if she should fail, just as Boris Johnson, managed to succeed in his, leadership contest vote, if most of the party is not with you, why are you a leader in the first place? So we will see. But the local elections are going to be the big chance for that. And that is something that we're going to be talking about next time. However, I want to cover this because we've always covered what the Conservative view of Kemi Badenoch is. And that is that it is, she's not doing a very good job that they had hoped for. There hasn't been too much policy, as we've said, come forward or any reforming. But at least, when, so we say that they talk to the faithful of, I don't know what we call them, the Badenochians. Yeah, I don't know what we would call them. Cameron had the Cameroons. May had the Mayites. Truss was obviously the Trussites. Sunak had the Sunakians. Are we just going to call them the Badenochians? Maybe that's what we end up calling them, but we'll see. But we're going to take a look now at what a more left-wing view is of Kemi Badenoch, and obviously it does not bode well when the Guardian is calling you, you've pitched your Tory tent in an absolute no man's land. So it's not good for Kemi Badenoch. So before we do get on into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. The YouTube thank you button is also down below as well. And of course, thank you very much to everyone who does help and support that as well. And of course, let's crack on into this. And of course, it is Wednesday or Thursday. So there is going to be a Pony Club. I've actually forgotten it was Wednesday, but there you go. So as always, thank you very much, everyone, for watching and supporting the channel in that way. So let's crack on then into this, coming from The Guardian. So, where is Kemi Badenoch's Tory tent? In a political no man's land. So, election defeats are to some degree self-inflicted. So, the first place that the opposition parties should look for someone to blame for their predicament is a mirror. The Conservatives have flinched from that task. And what have I been saying since the very election? That they need to take a really good long look in the mirror and actually say, "Oh, it's us. It's been our policy. It's been our ideology. It's the fact that we allowed, these Brexit headbangers, this right wing of the party, to sort of take over, still effectively in control of the party with Kemi Badenoch, pushing the party into this ever more hard right place where it's losing voters to the Lib Dems in quite significant numbers. And yet, rather than be worried about that, they're worried about reform." You can very clearly say their problems, but they cannot look in the mirror at all. So, back to this. The leadership race over the summer and autumn featured only a performance of reflection on these mistakes made by the last government. Again, very true. No reflection was made at all. The looking glass was positioned now very askew so that no one had to see themselves as part of the problem. Again, very, very true. Everything that we've been saying for months now. Kemi Badenoch obviously prevailed in this contest as now an embodiment of a theory that Britain had not rejected Conservative ideas when it evicted a Tory government, that true conservatism is what voters craved, and that they punished Rishi Sunak's party for failing to provide it, with Badenoch saying, "We talked right, but governed left." And yeah, we saw this as well when we were covering the post-election cope, that a lot of these conservative commentators and etc. were really trying to sort of console themselves that, "Oh, you don't worry, Britain yearns for true conservatism, and that's what we need to bring to them." But they'd rejected you en masse, massively rejected conservative ideas en masse. If that was the case, that they were really wanting conservative ideas, they would have voted for Rishi Sunak. Like, that's what they would have done. They would have voted for the Conservative Party. But of course, you've got to remember that a lot of these conservatives now that are there don't view traditional conservatism as real conservatism anymore. Again, bizarre, but there you go. That's, like I say, the weird and wonderful mess, and we've covered that time and time again on this channel, that the Conservative Party is in. So, in particular, of course, this analysis designates that Sunak, Liz Truss, and Boris Johnson, Theresa May, and David Cameron are now as politicians of the left. It also doesn't explain why so many Tory voters switched to Labour and the Liberal Democrats. Again, he's right. Again, Liz Truss wasn't a politician of the left. Neither was Rishi Sunak. Certainly, Theresa May and David Cameron weren't, and neither was Boris Johnson. So they weren't politicians of the left at all. These were conservatives who were delivering conservatism. But as we've said, all these conservatives that are there now consider that not true conservatism. Also, again, many Tory voters switching to Liberal Democrats. And yet, they do not consider the Liberal Democrats a threat. Time and time again, we have gone over article after article, worrying, whipping up a furore about reform when they lost more voters to the Lib Dems than any other party. And there is no attempt being made whatsoever to get those voters back. Instead, they all worry about reform. So, back to this. So a defense, of course, of Badenoch's position might be that she now had to secure support from her own party before reaching out to the country. Goading the demoralized members at least out of their comfort zone too soon is a way now to lose internal party elections. Again, true, but it is something the party, I think, should need to hear. Tom Tugendhat. If Tom Tugendhat had ran and doubled down on his campaign that he ran last time, that campaign would have been the only one that was calling out the mistakes of the previous Tory government. Instead, he didn't. He too went and drank the Kool-Aid. And he lost because of it. If he had actually done that, he would have massively distanced himself from every single other candidate. And he could have legitimately gone and attacked every single other candidate, and they would have had nothing to say in response to him because that was not their strategy. That was not in their plan. And if they did, they would have had to accept some culpability in their part in running the government. And they then do that. But back to this. But of course, nothing about this Tory leader hints now at a gift for disassembling the craft. Blurt candor was, of course, her first pitch for the job. She says what she thinks, and she really does think that Britain's problems now arise from an excess of leftism that has somehow managed to flourish during 14 years of Tory rule. I know. Just imagine all this leftism that flowered, that grew up under 14 years of Tory rule. Where did it come from? I had no idea that the Tory party was just so left. Again, if you know anything about politics, you know the Tory party were anything but left wing. So to make sense of this view, you have to picture that the beast that Badenoch now intends to try and vanquish. Hopefully, she's at least sketched the outlines last week in a speech in Washington, which again, as we said, did not go down well with her fellow conservatives reading those comments in Conservative Home. Her argument was that these now malevolent essences of communism has reinvented itself since the defeat of the Cold War and has now hacked liberal democracy. Like I say, her speech was quite wild. The old left reflux now of repressive intolerance comes now camouflaged as virtue, compassion for refugees, anti-racism. It captures the hearts and minds in a generation that has grown up now complacent about freedom, ignorant of the danger. And like I say, maybe we should go back and recover that speech because it is wild. But like I say, I wanted to cover more the reaction of the Conservatives, at least homegrown Conservatives in the UK, because there is a lot of saying, look, she knew what the audience was in America, that speech was more targeted at American Conservatives who sort of more respond to that type of stuff. But like I say, did not go down very well with other homegrown Conservatives. If she comes back and tries and delivers that same kind of speech to the UK, people will just turn around and go, what's she on about? as we saw in many of those comments. So this infiltration is of now, of course, double-pronged. The economic front now comes be a new kind of socialism, no longer defined by state control by the means of production, but now operating stealthily as a more remote manipulation of citizens' lives. And of course, Badenoch quoted a, quote, fantastic, again, she did say it was a fantastic speech by Argentina's radical libertarian president, Javier Milei. And again, remember where Milei gets all his economic advice from his dead dog that he uses a clairvoyant to contact, who also happens to be on the government payroll. So is Kemi Badenoch going to be using that clairvoyant as well to talk to his, dead dog? Like I say, journalists, please start picking up on that fact, because that is a true thing that is reported, and not many people pick on the fact when they talk about this. This is a really good chance to really hammer it home into Kemi Badenoch. So Radical President Charlie Millet, with, of course, this new socialism now said to nest, of course, in such nefarious activities as now controlling interest rates and regulations now to correct market failures. Yeah, the terrible, vile left controlling interest rates. The second front is, of course, cultural and the suffocation of free speech by centrist woke ideologies. Although this doctrine has yet to actually achieve anything of resembling electoral success, its dissemination through the halls of academia is evidence now of its potential to undo Western civilization. Woke fanatics don't need to win power on strength of their argument alone because they now piggyback on the more popular, devious, moderate left-wing promises of a state that provides decent social services. Like I say, maybe we should go back and recover that speech because I did say it was pretty wild. Anyway, voter stability now to this siren law of well-reasoned public sector is something that Badenoch, of course, lamented in a speech to the Confederation of British Industry last month, saying that it's hard to now make a case for a smaller state, she said, because people want the government to solve everything. And if you ever sound hesitant, you are made out to be a cruel, unfeeling person. And guess what? If you talk about state control, about what people like about the state, people like state control. They like the government doing things. They like the government providing these services. Even conservatives, when polled, like that stuff. But when Badenoch says she wants a smaller state, this is when you can reply and go, okay, what is it the government should no longer do? And that is the conversation they are terrified of having, because at that point, they're like, well, maybe we should get rid of the Department of Education, because after all, if she's likes Millet so much, and again, as we're probably seeing in America, the Department of Education potentially under threat over there as well, that could go. That could cause so many problems with education throughout the country. You're seeing it already happen in Argentina. But does she care about the fantastic speeches that Millet has given about the fantastic state of the Argentinian infrastructure and an education system? Don't think so. Anyway, none of this, of course, is original thinking, and historically, this is the early stage in the electoral cycle. So it would not matter what a new opposition leader was, of course, saying. There would, of course, now be time to try and get the message right. But failure to have an honest reckoning with the scale of July's defeat is already now feeding the impatience for a speedier recovery amongst Tory MPs. And 2/3 of them voted for a different leader at the last ballot of the parliamentary party. And there you have a monumental problem. If you are leader, 2/3 of your MPs voted for someone else. They're not with you. They want this fast recovery because they have not still had a reckoning with their defeat. They still have not acknowledged that happened. And I generally thought Tom Tugendhat might come out, double down on his last leadership, race that he did, and really go say, we're doing all these things wrong. I am the fresh start that the Tory party needs. This is where we went wrong. And it's time that we thought again on all these topics and subjects. That's what he did last time. Obviously, he didn't win last time, but that message massively would have separated him. Massively would separate him from the rest of that audience. How successful he would have been, who knows? But he would have certainly been the only Tory MP out there to make a name for themselves. And as I've said before, these MPs that we've covered, like David Gauke, or former MP like David Gauke, who is one of the few Tory MPs out there, again with Rory Stewart, saying, actually, guys, this is everything that's wrong with the party. This is everything that's wrong. They are being treated like pariahs, like heretics, and these terrible, awful people. How they can even be there saying these things. But these are the people who have already come to the realization of what is wrong with their party. But they're being treated like outcasts and lepers, that eventually people are going to actually turn around and start to think, actually, they've got a point. But we're not even there yet. They're not even there yet. We are still at this recrimination stage. And I think this is going to go on for quite some time before they really start to rethink about this. So back to this. Badenoch's position is now unusually vulnerable because she doesn't have a secure claim to, of course, be the standard bearer for the right. Nigel Farage's Reform UK may only have 5 MPs, but it is now nurturing a party with Labour and the Conservatives in the opinion polls. At this stage, this isn't now a meaningful indicator of what will happen, of course, in a general election that is years away. Again, very true. But it does indicate now an underlying volatility and the promiscuity now of voter allegiance, and it makes it very hard to exclude any outcome. The first past the post electoral system generates stable, predictable results if there are 2 big parties with vote shares that, of course, stifle smaller challenges. If several parties do poll around 20 to 25%, the allocation of the seats could go haywire. And that's something maybe at the next election, maybe we could see. Maybe we could see that happen. Maybe we end up with a coalition next time. But again, too early to tell what's going to go on at the next election. But there's a lot of people that do speculate about that already. Maybe we could see a minority government. Maybe we see, again, a coalition government. I think that is very, very possible indeed. So, a rational evaluation of the Tories' now electoral challenge would, of course, focus as much on seats lost to the Lib Dems as surrendered to Reform. Sensible Conservatives are also worried about next year's local council elections and will see Ed Davey's troops quietly digging themselves deeper into now the former Tory heartlands. The right-leaning newspapers and, of course, GB News platforms as the usual routine for Farage amplification. And that's true. Ed Davey is probably, and the Lib Dems, probably going to be the biggest winners out of those local council seats. Because remember, that 2021 local council election was like the last time the Tories won big. After that, it was all downhill from there. All downhill from there, because that was the vaccine boost year. That was the vaccine boost bump year that they got from that. After that, Partygate, everything else, straight downhill from there. So they are going to lose a lot of seats. They are going to lose a lot of seats. But it's just a question of who then is the beneficiary of that. I think it's going to ultimately be the Lib Dems. Because if they dig themselves deeper into those Tory heartlands even more, it becomes even more difficult to then get rid of them. And this is something you'd think the Conservatives should be focused on, worried about the threat that the Lib Dems actually pose. But again, they're not, because they have not had that proper reconciliation of the party to think, actually, is it our policies? Is it our ideologies that's wrong? Maybe we should rethink our stance on these things. But no, that's not what's happened. So back to this. Badenoch's, of course, dilemma will be to, of course, more accurately, or at least more acutely, will, of course, be more acute, and, of course, a capacity for maneuver even tighter. But instead now of addressing structural threats to her party's position in the real world because of British electoral politics, the Conservative leader is now casting herself as a visionary warrior against the phantom hordes of neo-communists mustering in Whitehall and on university campuses. She went full culture warrior. But as we've said before, culture war and warrior speeches do not work in the UK. Importing that culture war stuff, as the Tories have tried many, many times, has not worked, has not reaped any electoral dividends. And even in America, where that now is becoming a lot less, even that's reaping less electoral rewards for them. it shows that it's only have a short shelf life. And if they even did manage to implement it, how long a shelf life would that have? I think it would have a very short shelf life, to be honest. So perhaps this is, of course, now based on a gamble, based on Donald Trump's imminent return to the White House. Maybe Badenoch thinks that the future of conservatism is now prefigured, of course, in the Republicans' party capture by its combination of the tech bro libertarianism, anti-woke hysteria, and xenophobic nationalism. The tariff-wielding protectionist part of Trump's agenda now tends to be downplayed by his British cheerleaders, since it sits very awkwardly with their professed devotion to free trade. Yep. All those Tory Brexiteers talking about how that's the direction that the world is heading in, this free trade wonderland. No, these Trump tariffs are going to be bad. Going to be very bad indeed. So maybe the Tory leader just, of course, feels the need enough to now rival Farage as the incoming president's official British, as the unofficial British sat rep. However, any dalliance, of course, by Badenoch with Trump and the fandom will, of course, chase the liberal ex-Tories now deeper into the Lib Dem embrace without even wooing anyone back from reform. Exactly. Once again, Ed Davey is loving welcoming all these people in, because I would really be interested to see the numbers of Lib Dem membership. Like, how high is the Lib Dem membership from the last election, previously, during, and then after? It would be interesting to see, because I would not be surprised if their membership has gone up. I would not be surprised if their membership has gone up in the Lib Dem party. So this same, of course, problem arises with a compulsion to shrink the state. Plenty of voters think that taxes are, of course, too high and that public money gets wasted. That doesn't mean that they will now rally to the idiosyncratic Badenoch-led crusade against freedom-hating bureaucrats. She argues that the government should do less, but never says which of its current functions should be scrapped. Filling in the blank is now ultimately likely to make her unlikely to make her more popular. The Conservatives under Sunak now spent their very final years in office torn between conflicting demands of the practical government and the ideological mania, between the belief that taxes should always come down and the voter appetite for services that work, between the liberal labour market that relies on immigration and the populist pledges to repeal foreigners. Sunak positioned the Tories with exquisite position in a political no man's land, where voters left, right, and centre all had their reasons to feel aggrieved. Badenoch's plan looks at least more intellectually contrived edifice on the same underpopulated patch of electoral real estate. Maybe this time it will work. Maybe if she actually builds her shrine to true conservatism, masses of voters will come to worship. But it isn't clear who or where they actually are. And it is rather later than she thinks. Very true indeed. And I think you can tell very, very clearly indeed, that the probably even after certainly the new year, if Badenoch hasn't really dropped any, I'd say, policies by March, April time, I think we're going to start seeing briefs against her. I think you're going to start to see a lot more Tories become very, very angry. I think, again, she's got a honeymoon period. They are willing to let her go. Okay, you've just come in. Let's see what you've got. She, by all accounts, to what we've seen on Conservative Home, they consider her to be vastly underperforming. With that, we will see what happens if she can retain her level of popularity with Conservative members now that she is the leader, now that she actually has to do things. Just remember, she was riding high. She was like 70, almost verging on 80% of favorability when she was pre-leader. Now that she is the leader, we will see if her favorability, if she can keep that I don't think she will. I think we will be seeing her fall slowly down the rankings ever more. Even more faster, of course, the second she starts to deploy any policy. And the thing is, if she doesn't deploy any policy, what's the Conservative Party actually meant to stand for? You know? Because that speech she gave in Washington, Conservatives back here did not buy it. They did not buy it. So she is in trouble. She is already significantly in trouble, and she's only gets more and more into trouble the more she does not talk about policy, the more she does not talk about reform, or at least, if she talks about wanting a smaller state, well, okay, what is she going to do? What is she going to do to cut the size of the state? What is the government no longer going to do? All these things come together, and she's already in trouble. And even if Robert Jarrick had won, I really think he would be in the same position as Kemi Badenoch now, because he is exactly the same, except maybe he might be a little bit more right wing. He might be putting his foot on the pedal just a little bit faster. But who knows? But hey, maybe we might see that in a couple of years' time. But like I say, I think she has really until 2026. Maybe she's got even shorter time. Maybe even shorter. But certainly after those May local elections, if they lose, which they will lose a significant number of seats, then big questions are going to be asked of Kemi Badenoch. Expect there to be a 1922 committee meeting where she's going to have to lay out, explain that loss, what she intends to do about it, then expect the panic to really set in. And as we've said before, when Tories panic, they do not make the best decisions. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think down below as well. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.